and welcome back for more Flute Tube summer session. Today we're going to talk about your tongue. Your tongue is important to think about whenever you're articulating, and especially if you're double or triple tonguing. And so that both you and I know that you have something to practice after our talk today that you can use to help think and process what we're discussing today. I'm going to give you a link to the Altes 26 Selected Studies entire book of etudes. It's my gift to you because it's free and it's in the public domain. And as far as double tonguing exercises go, take a good look at number 12, especially if you never have. My students probably know it's one of my very favorite double tonguing exercises. It's great for both endurance and speed. And in future episodes, I'll give you more of my favorite double tonguing exercises. But first for today, we're not going to focus on every single possible exercise. I just want to get all of you flute players out there to develop a lot of tongue awareness. Think of this as Tongue Awareness Week. The tongue is very important for us as flute players. And on the bright side, if you practice hard, you're all going to end up having the fastest tongue in your town. Growing up, I heard several times that the tongue is the strongest muscle in our bodies. And I've since learned that that's really not quite true, but it still is one of the very strongest groups of muscles that we have. And obviously, it's also very flexible. Just think about all that your tongue does. It helps us to eat, but especially think about language. Just think about all the different noises that are used in the various languages out there in the world. So when we articulate, we want to remember just how flexible our tongues are. It means that we have lots of options of how to use our tongue when we play the flute. Be sure you just don't say to yourself, oh yeah, I learned how to tongue many years ago and I just say ta or da and that's very simple, and never re-examine it, because we can't see what we're doing with our tongue and we can get into really some bad or lazy or sloppy habits with it. And that's why you need to develop as much tongue awareness as you can and avoid common tongue problems. One of the most common problems people have is really not quite using the very tip of their tongues. Or maybe they're using the tip but they're putting it too far back on their hard palate. Sometimes people do things like anchoring their tongue. They'll put their tongue down on the tip of their tongue under their bottom teeth and they'll tongue ta kind of with the middle of their tongue, and it might take years for them to figure out that this is what they're doing. So basically you want to say tu or do, and you want it to be right behind where your gums and the roof of your mouth meet your teeth. Right there, ta 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 ta, and just the tip of your tongue. As far as double tonguing goes, I always remind my students just how flexible our tongues are, because I notice that especially when they go fast, when they double tongue, they often tense up their whole tongue. But this is completely not necessary. Think of how when you speak, you don't ever unnecessarily tighten any portion of your tongue. And nobody ever has to say in the middle of a long talk with a friend, oh, just excuse me for a minute, I have to stop talking so that I can rest my tongue. Yet, especially when we double tongue, we do get our tongues tired because we unnecessarily tighten them. And sure, you have to build up a little endurance, but keep in mind your tongue really is very strong and flexible. So because I used to have in mind that the tongue is the single strongest muscle in our bodies, I used to tell students to pretend that they had two tongues. They had the small tongue in the front of their mouth that's going daga 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 or kata 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 or that kind of thing. And then they had this big separate tongue in the back of their mouth that was just lying there being completely relaxed. And I'd think, pretend you have two completely separate tongue muscles. Well, in fact, I learned from an anatomist later on some things that I found very useful and interesting. So here you go. Because I'd heard that the tongue was the strongest muscle in the body, it never occurred to me that in fact it's made out of more than one muscle. The tongue itself has 8 different muscles. There are 4 intrinsic muscles in your tongue that your tongue uses to change shape and that kind of thing. And then there are 4 extrinsic muscles that anchor your tongue to bone. And in fact, as I had sort of figured out just through my experiences playing the flute, the human tongue is divided into 2 parts. There's the oral part at the front and the pharyngeal part at the back. So we're using the oral part of our tongue, obviously, to tongue, but that back part of your tongue really should not be involved when you're tonguing. It should be completely relaxed. So you can think of what the front of your tongue is doing quite separately from what the back part of your tongue is doing. And all these different muscles help your tongue move and be as astonishingly flexible as it is. The intrinsic muscles in our tongue are unique in our bodies because they're not connected to any bones. The tongue is remarkably flexible because it's only connected to other muscles. And this is how the anatomist told me that in this way, your tongue is like an octopus. Think of the arms of an octopus. They work just like our tongues, and they're so flexible, and they're not connected to any bones, of course, because octopuses don't have any bones. But if you think of the arms of an octopus, it's one of the most versatile muscular systems that can be found anywhere. Each of its arms can adopt so many different shapes, manipulate things so amazingly well that it seems to have just an infinite amount of freedom. Each octopus arm has this extraordinarily complex set of muscles, and it can use some muscles to act as though they are a skeleton for support while other muscles contract. So an octopus can extend or contract an arm, it can bend it anywhere along its length, and it can twist it as much as it likes. Theoretically, it could tie a knot in its arm and then run that knot down the length of its arm and run it off the tip of its arm. And I feel like I've seen that in a cartoon, but it could theoretically actually happen. So tongues are very similar muscular systems to what octopuses or octopodes have. And that's why we can do all these fancy tongue tricks. So the tongue is a very different muscular system than the rest of the human body. Our bodies are vertebrate, which means they operate by muscle working on bone to move, but the tongue is actually in a different muscular family, as though we were invertebrates. It's entirely muscle. It's just muscle that's moving muscle. So the moral of the story here is you really can work hard with just the tip of your tongue or just the little portion of your muscles that say digga, 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 and keep the rest of your tongue very relaxed because your tongue is made of this system of very flexible muscles. Now, for inspiration, I will allow you to go and find a YouTube video of an octopus. Watch an octopus move. Notice how flexible and independent its octopus arms are. But then, of course, get off of YouTube and go practice. Just don't forget how our tongues are flexible like an octopus. And when you do tonguing exercises, especially double or triple tonguing, be sure that you keep your entire tongue as relaxed as possible. Only use the little tiny portion of your tongue you actually need to move to make the articulation. Don't tighten anything else for no reason. And keep in mind how relaxed and flexible your tongue is when you speak. Even if you're speaking all day long, it just never gets tired. And even though you're using it in such a bafflingly complex way when you speak.